John, first of all, John Bonham, when did your musical career start? Right from the beginning?
I was 14 years old, I think, something like that, when I was at school. That was about the beginning of it. Played in a school pantomime. And it just sort of materialised from there, you know. Left school and we formed small groups and things like that, you know, and played locally and everything.
What musicians can you remember being impressed with when you were at school?
Oh, crikey. It's easy to say groups, really. I mean, in those days it was sort of like Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, and groups like Liverpool groups like the Hollies and things like that were a strong influence there. But particular musicians, it's hard. Graeme Bond was one of those then, wasn't he? You know, which was included sort of Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. They were sort of one of those things then when I was at school. Well, more or less when I left, I think.
Did you go straight into music when you left school?
No. Well, I used to play, you know, but I used to have a job as well. I used to be working all the time. You know, it's quite a... But, you know, the job, gradually, you know, everybody seems to have done that, and the job gradually gets less and the music more, you know. That's what seems to happen.
What was your job?
But when I first left school, I was working with my father in the building trade. We used to be good builders there.
Okay, so when did you first become a full-time musician then?
When I was 16, I went full-time for a while. You know, we had off and on periods. You'd like have an attempt, you know, to make a success of a professional group, and then it wouldn't go the way you all planned it out to go, and you'd end up having to go back to work to get a little bit of money to carry on, you know, to sort of live with, really. And that's how it used to go, really. You know, you'd have a time, go out on the road and everything would be roses, and then all of a sudden, no more gigs, no more money, and you're back to where you started, you know. And that's how it went on, really, right up until, you know, just before Zeppelin started.
What sort of music were you playing then?
Oh, well, you know, and going back as far as that, most of those groups, we used to just sort of play other people's stuff, you know. It was like you'd play anything from the latest hit by the Hollies to sort of, you know, to something by a blues artist. It was that, you know, that sort of thing you've got to do, you know, to survive, really, to play in locally anyway, you know. And then, you know, and that was about it then, because we, you know, didn't do any writing or anything in those days.
Did you have any particular tastes in music at the time developed?
No, I don't think so, not really. You know, I used to sort of, then I just, you know, used to buy old, completely different sort of records, you know. And, you know, even now, you know, I still do. You know, you might like the most poppiest record ever, you know. You might just like it for some reason, you know. I don't think I've ever been sort of really set on something.
How did you first come to join Led Zeppelin then?
Oh, well, I've known Robert for a number of years, because we, you know, were in two groups previously. I was in a group with Robert when we were about 16, weren't we, first of all? We had that group. And then we also got back together only about a year before Zeppelin formed, wasn't it? Was it a bit before that, was it? Yeah. And, well, the story of how it started is better from Robert, because he was, you know, around before me, so it'd be better really for him to sort of explain how I came, you know, to be with them. So, you know, it'd be easier sort of coming from Robert.
Robert Plant, which indeed is your name.
Mm-hmm.
When did you first start off in music?
I was about the same age as John, but I was at school at the time, and the people who had any influence at all on me weren't the people who had... Well, there were a lot of people at school who had about £5 a week pocket money, you know, which was a lot of money to have for pocket money, and they used to buy all the records that were around at the time, but they didn't really intrigue me. There was a folk club in the area, and going to that on a Friday night and seeing all these people with sloppy jumpers and beards and long hair, I went, well, that's an alternative, and the music was also an alternative. So I ended up playing in little blues duets, in these folk clubs. Disastrously, playing harmonica and all that. But it was the beginnings of it. And we formed several old blues bands that we used to hire a room in a pub on a Friday night and charge about 3 shillings to get in, and you get about 100 people in. Chris Wood used to play with us from Traffic, and we had an amazing bass player who ended up driving Ringo around, who adored Mick Jagger and looked a little bit like Bill Wyman, and he used to hold he had the same bass guitar held right up as if he was Trooping the Colour, So it was quite an amazing start to things. There were a lot of influences I'd care not to mention.
Go on, mention one.
No, not with the Australian government. And so that set me off on the road, and I suddenly found out that Friday nights weren't really as rewarding as Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays, So it was down to a group of some sort and keeping that music around as well. So we started different groups, Black Snake Moan and the Crawling King Snakes, which John and I had. But as time went on, we found the only way to keep 10 shillings in your pocket was to play something apart from blues, So we ended up playing Watch Your Step type stuff, Bobby Parker, things around that weren't really overplayed by anybody, but they were really good things to do. I mean, people are still doing them now. So that was the start. Then I eventually went professional when I left school. I was supposed to be trained to be a chartered accountant, and after 3 weeks of an adding machine and tea bags, that was out. And we turned professional and tried to pull everything out of the bag that could be pulled out of the bag in publicity and everything, but it was no good because the group wasn't really any good. And by about 1966, 67, the San Francisco music was just crossing over to here. In records, if not in flourishing record critics' trumpeteering, and all that. So there was Moby Grape's first album and Love and people like that. So we formed the band of Joy. John eventually came into that, and we were doing Jefferson Airplane stuff, She Has Funny Cars and all that sort of thing. Plastic Fantastic Lover, but nobody wanted to hear it, So we'd do about 3 gigs a week, some places around this area, which was the only places we could travel. We had no agent in London or manager or anything like that. The music wasn't really a saleable commodity, like if you're getting £15 a night or something like that, you've got to stick in this area, otherwise you just don't make any money at all. So that was what it was all about, poverty, So after about 12 months of poverty, John started playing with Tim Rose on drums, and I eventually started doing a blues duet yet again, but with Alexis Corner. And Alexis never works on anything that's a permanent basis. It's always very temporary. He's got these TV commercials that he must do, and he has to write books on the blues and things. So he says, well, you can play with me when I feel like playing. I'm going to Essen in about a month's time, come with me and all that, but I won't be doing anything in between. So I had to get something more solid together, and nothing came along at all. And then all of a sudden I had a telegram out of the blue saying Keith Relf had left the Yardbirds, and I didn't believe it, I still got the telegram somewhere, but I didn't believe it because I went, oh, somebody's out getting me at it. And about a month later I was at Jimmy's place, and
How did he hear of you?
through Terry Reid, another singer who I'd worked with in some far-reaching place about 12 months before, and we'd sat and watched each other and had a great time. And then the next thing I know, 12 months later, he'd recommended me for the job after turning it down himself. So I went down to James's place, and he wasn't there, so I just went through all his records and pulled out the ones I liked, and he got back, and apparently he liked the same sort of thing, So that was a start. We hadn't got a drummer, and I knew that there was only one drummer that was really any good that I'd ever seen, and that was John. So it was the same trick with the telegrams and the telephone, and he didn't believe it either. He was working around with Tim Rose and earning some money, and I came up to try and persuade him, this group is going to be a giant and all that, it's got to be. And he was going, yes, I know. Anyway, I've got to get off now, and I spend the whole weekend traipsing around to gigs with him every time I could get him up a corner saying, listen. And so eventually he came down, and I think we had 2 rehearsals, and then we recorded the first album.
What about John Paul Jones? How did he...
Well, he'd been doing sessions with Jimmy for a long time. You know, they'd been playing on other people's records for about 3 or 4 years. So he knew Jimmy, and he was fed up of just walking into sessions with an amp and a guitar, you know. And so Jimmy said, well, I've got this bass player, and I don't know whether he's come about this point in a different way to you, you know what I mean? I mean, I've been playing around and around and around, and he'd been in the studio, but he got so fed up with it that he was ready to have a go at stage, which is a strange way around of doing it, but anyway, that's how it happened.
Have you ever done any session work?
Yeah, played harmonica on a PJ Proby album. That's about as far as I got. Well, there's not really, I could sing backing for Lulu, I suppose, or something like that. But you know how it is, everybody does their own material and goes as far as they can inside themselves, you know what I mean, really, unless you're doing a big fantasia. I don't really like the idea anyway, you know. I like to sing when I've written something and I can work out the melody lines and the harmonies and things myself. But to go in and be told to sing something, I can't do that anyway.
With your writing, do you find you write better on your own or with the others?
Well, usually with the others, you know, because you've got to be put into momentum by something in the first place. So I'm not really that competent on a guitar to be able to sit down and compose a whole thing on my own. You know, I look after the lyrics. But it's only recently that I've started playing instruments so as I can construct whole songs, you know. So I prefer to write with other people at the same time. You know, when something's being initially born in its first stage, 90% of the song.
Now back to John Bonham. John, could you describe to us in minute detail what it was like the first time the 4 of you got together?
Pretty strange, really. The first time the 4 of us got together was, as Rob said, really, a day was arranged at Jimmy's house at Pangbourne for us all to meet, you know, and apart from myself knowing Robert, I didn't know anybody else. So it was the first time I met Jimmy. No, sorry, I met Jimmy when Robert and Jimmy came to see me playing in London one night, but it was only for a few minutes, really, you know, and then they went. It was quite strange, really, meeting sort of like John Paul and Jimmy, you know, coming from where I'd come from, you know. I'd sort of been playing in local groups now, you know, and as Robert said, that's why we all thought, you know, it was a bit of a joke getting the sort of telegrams and things, you know, that there's a chance of becoming one of the Yardbirds sort of thing. Was just like, it was like a gift from heaven, wasn't it?
Doesn't mean we're not brilliant, you know. It just
Say that again.
It doesn't mean we're not brilliant. It just means that, like, when you're up here, it's like the dark lands of the borders of Mordor, you know, really, because promoters and the whole music scene is set on a very strange level in this area, even now, you know. There's venues that they can fill up, you know, they can fill a place of 1,500 people with they can stick the world's worst group on, you know, and so long as it plays nice beat, harmony music. I mean, you must have that situation in Australia. The people will just come just to dance and hop around, you know, but there has to come an end to the dancing and hopping around. And we never really thought that we'd ever get out of these silly people who'd say, right, we'll have you on we'll take your contract for a year, we'll give you 30 quid a week each, ask no questions, and play this, and this, you know. And we hadn't for about 18 months or 2 years, and we were really feeling a bit whacked from not towing the line, you know. So really, it should have come, or we might have even done it ourselves eventually. But it was just that we never expected it to come unexpectedly, you know what I mean? It just came, bang.
Okay, back to John. So what was it like that first time that you all got together and played?
Well, I was pretty shy, you know. I just sort of, you know, the best thing I had to do was to sort of, when you're in a situation like that, is not to say much and just to sort of soldier along and suss it all out, sort of thing, you know. And we had a good play that day, and it went quite well, you know. But it wasn't, you know, it got together very quickly because there was, at this stage, you know, there was already sort of a tour that had to be done by the Yardbirds, which was a few days, you see, and we actually went there as the Yardbirds. Well, of course, it got billed as the new Yardbirds and all this sort of thing. And then it went so well, really, that, you know, the group became strong enough really to start fresh, you know, rather than sort of keep the Yardbirds name. You know, it was a sort of decision that we'd change the name. And we made the album straight after coming back from Scandinavia, the first one. You know, and I mean, how long have we been together about then? A month?
No, not that.
Wasn't that? You know, and yet it went well, you know. There was a lot of ideas that came out, and it was really good. The playing was good, you know. Even the first time we played together, you know, there's a feeling, you know, when you're playing a group, whether it's going to be any good or whether it's not, you know. And it was good. It was very good indeed. And it sort of went on from there, really, you know. At that time, I don't think I had any idea that the group was going to, you know, achieve what it has. You know, you could tell it was going to be a good group, you know, like, you know, not being sort of flash about it. But I am. And that, you know, I didn't give it much thought, really, you know, and in no time it sort of grows, you know. You suddenly find yourself sitting back, you know, and, you know, the next album came out and all this. I mean, we went to America, but things up until really, I think, see, we were formed in what? It was the end of '68, and it was at least the middle of '69 before anything reaction in Britain, as far as, you know, compared to anywhere else. We went to the States, you know, which we had to, because nobody would touch the group in England. You know, you'd say, you know, want to take some dates on Led Zeppelin, you know, and all this sort of thing, and, you know, people wouldn't even book you. And then you came back from America after you know, the first album and all this sort of, you know, being a sort of #1 album and everything. And of course everybody wanted to book the group. Then it was like a change of tune, you know. It was like, and that's really why we, you know, a lot of people said, you know, they go on about going to America and abandon them, really, and all this, you know, why don't you play for us? But at that time you bloody well couldn't. Nobody had booked the band, you know. You couldn't play there. So you actually sort of had to go to America to play, you know.
You did it the other way round to, for instance, a group like the Beatles, who made it here, and then
yeah,
it was quite tough for them to crack America for a start.
Yeah, it was opposite. But yeah, you know, I always liked playing in Britain, probably more than anywhere else. You know, it's a funny thing, you know. If we're ever playing gigs in England, I really, you know, we always look forward to it. You know, you can get to America really, and I don't know, it's so much easier to play in England. You know, you can get the motor out the garage and toddle off, and you're so at ease all the time, you know. Whereas if you're in America, you're all day in a hotel somewhere having arguments with bloody rednecks and, you know, turd heads and everything. And then you've got to go to the gig, you know, where all the kids are going to think, you know, that you should be doing your best and playing, you know, and feeling good about it all and everything. But, you know, it does affect you, like what's happened previously in the day. Whereas in England, you know, you're in your own atmosphere all the time. You know, you're in your own homes and everything. You go to a gig and you feel bloody great, you know, because you've gone through nothing to get there. Do you see what I mean? You know, that's the difference of it, really.
Robert, we'll just have a word with you on the same subject. Do you feel that this thing that John's talking about could be because of the audiences at all?
Well, the thing of preferring to play here than in America? Well, I don't really know. You know, England's always been classic for seeing something get ginormous and then turning around and saying, oh, well, I knew it all the time, you know. But I'm English as well. And so I can, you know, I mean, I've been a part of all that old rubbish. Audiences are strange things, and the power of word of mouth is even stranger, you know, which is what it was to begin with for us. And until we started playing and we did the second Bath Festival, or the first one. I think it was the first one. And it just went so well, you know, really so well. I don't mind where I play. I don't really dig America, you know.
I can remember in Australia, because I was doing a program that was an all-album show, and I can remember that when you first came out with the first album, then everybody was sort of discovering, everybody who was supposedly into progressive music and so on, was discovering Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page's new band and everything like this. Then after a couple of albums had come out and a few singles were successful as well, it seemed like you committed some sort of unpardonable sin, and everybody started saying, well, they're no longer a progressive band, they're all commercial and everything. Do you get the same thing happening in England?
Well, really, you see, I don't really know, because everybody's entitled to that. I mean, when people listen to music at a concert, everybody comes away with a different impression. They must do, you know. Otherwise, people aren't individuals at all. You know what I mean? Every person can't think the same way, and they can't all, or you can't split them down the middle and say, well, half think that you're doing this and half think that you're doing that. You know, it's just something to talk about, I suppose. But really, when you think about the fact that the music that was called progressive is now majority music anyway. So you've got most people listening to it, most people buying it, and most people going to the concerts. You get to a point where it really doesn't matter what you're doing anyway, so long as people are digging it, and if a lot of people are buying it, then, and it's still the same as it ever was, then there's no question at all. There's no argument even. You know what I mean?
When you first got the band together, you must have had some basic ideas, basic musical concepts as a group that you wanted to follow. How would you sum those up?
Well, at the beginning it was the construction of things with different time patterns and the changes just like that, you know, like in Dazed and Confused and How Many More Times, which somehow or other came to us like that, you know. Everybody just slipped in and fell in, so that it never, very seldom did it sort of ease its way into another change. It just fell automatically, you know. So that was the first thing that we got into, you know, those sort of things. Then I suppose it just followed those lines on and on and on until we were writing small songs, little songs, big songs, you know, acoustic things like that. It fits in with as time goes by and what you listen to during the time, you know, the whole influence of everything around you. So you just carry on just changing gradually. That's why every album can't be the same, you know. That's why A Whole Lot of Love can't come 5 times a year. You know what I mean?
And what influences were there?
Well, you can't really tell, can you? Because I mean, you like a lot of things. I can tell you who I like, you know. But it's all sorts of things that hit you in the back of your mind, maybe, and you don't even know about, you know. And attitudes and states of mind and everything, and the whole thing flows like that.
While you're sort of progressing along your own musical development sort of road, if you like, do you find that there are people that you really like? Say, for instance, when Led Zeppelin started, that you're now embarrassed about liking?
No, I don't think so. I don't think my tastes have changed much. I've just encompassed a lot more, you know. Because there was a time when I wouldn't listen to not the Kinks, but groups who at that time everybody said, oh dear me, the Hollies and all that. But then all of a sudden I realised they're really good, you know. For what they were incredible. So I listened to Arthur Lee, Love and Moby Grape, things like that, which I really dug, and I still dig them now, you know. I play them as much now as I did when I bought them, you know, 3 years ago.
Right, and what about now? Is there anyone particularly stands out to you, or any group?
I like Joni Mitchell a lot, you know. I think she's like that is a musical poet, you know. Somebody who's really, a voice and the guitar and everything is so sympathetic to what she's talking about. You know, I really like that. Group-wise, the Youngbloods I like, now and again. And they're really funny. Freddie King, I think I like. But there's so many. I mean, I could talk about the Capris and the Dartels and all these people way back. But I mean, it just anything goes all the time, really.
Do you find, even though musicians are thinking anything goes at the moment, do you find any difficulty with the media, like radio stations and the television channels?
Well, we avoid as much of it as we want to, you know, for a start. We don't do any television because it's a bit of a fiasco. If you've been to Top of the Pops set yet, you know, you see. No, I don't think so.
So you don't really come across any hassles like this, say, with getting airplay and so on?
Well, it's up to, the way we look at it is it's up to people to put it on if they want to, I think. You know, that's why we don't embark in great big sort of flashes of publicity. Because, I mean, then you'd just be committed all the time to, you know, following your own tail. So really it's up to At the moment, because the album prior to the one that comes out sells well, they're playing it, I suppose. But it's also very good, so it's up to them, up to the... In America, you get a case of it. It'll be played on the FM stations. In England, there's two disc jockeys, I suppose, that choose 3 tracks that they like and might play them for about a month, and that's it. That's all you get.
The favourite term of...
But this is the power of word of mouth, working.
Favourite term of journalists at the moment is you see a question asked in just about every interview. Do you think you have sold out?
Well, what on earth is selling out when the majority are digging the kind of music that you're playing? They've come to you. You haven't gone to them. We started off playing the way we're playing now. Really, it's just that we've written a lot more things. And at the time when we first started, maybe 10 people knew who we were, and now because maybe 10 million do, and more. But it don't make any difference. We're still playing. You know what I mean? You can't. What do you do to sell out? I really don't know. You're either popular or you're not.
Well, in just speaking about the same thing, do you find any pressures coming from your success? Any pressures to write when normally before you probably would have sat around?
No, because I sit around all the time anyway. It's not very often that I do write. Sometimes I'll have a burst for about half an hour, and then one day we'll all get together and it'll go bang, and I'll be for a month, engrossed. I fiddle around on the guitar and things like that, and when something really good comes out, then I'll do the lyrics to that as well. But most of the time I just sit around.
There's no heavy pressure from the record companies to get that next album ready or anything like that?
If there is, we don't hear it. Make sure of that. No, I don't think so, because we've got a reasonable working association with them, They know what we want to do. They know the pace we want to go at. And sometimes this pace is a little too fast, but sitting around is pretty good.
Do you feel as a musician, and obviously in a point of influence, if you had anything to say to the world, do you feel any responsibility in this direction?
Now and again, yeah. It's hard to build a foundation on what that you should have to be responsible for anything, because the whole idea of what you do is so that the responsibilities are only the ones that you incur on yourself and not the media or anything like that. But you do see a lot of things, and you do get tear gassed, and you do see situations that build up and are presented to the general public in the wrong way, totally the wrong way, and you worry and you discuss it and you say forget it, but you don't forget it at all. So it creeps in now and again, if you listen hard to what's going on.
What sort of subjects do you feel this way about?
Well, just the general direction of everything, really. I mean, I'm not complacent, and I don't think... The trouble is with the Englishman, he's always noted to, when the time is nearly over for him, he'll roll his sleeves up and get into battle, and the English race is a fine race. But the problems that we're going to be faced with soon aren't going to require the same way of stopping them as they did in the past, So the problems that we've got, like with the rivers and all that sort of rubbish, and the general run of things, and the fact that so many more people are aware of how things are going, you know what I mean? Well, as far as pollution and all that sort of thing, it's so evident now that people are talking about it. Cliff Richard's singing about it. The whole thing is ready, and I think, well, I don't know what we're waiting for, because I don't really know what happens next, except for that there's got to be the brakes have got to be put on.
Well, you obviously introduce certain things where you feel it in your lyrics. Is there any particular song that you wrote, sort of, to use an old term, a protest song?
Well, they're not protest songs, they're just sort of epithet statements almost, because a point of view is a point of view, and the only reason that we don't solve all our problems when they come up is because everybody's got a point of view, and they don't gel very often, they're not meant to. So things like, there's all, if you listen to a lot of the songs, things like Celebration Day, you know, which I say is dedicated to New York, but it ain't really. It's just dedicated to anywhere you like. That's that's no good, you know. And to the run of things, but they're not. They don't go into the ifs and whys and wherefores. They just say, well, look, you know, because I'm in no position to offer any alternatives. Really, Stairway to Heaven in a way, I suppose, just to a way of being, but it's very epithet again. And going to California, Misty Mountain Hop, but they're not digging so much as just stating about different things, you know.
Do you feel then that this is your responsibility? Just
No, not really. It's just that they're the only things that intrigue me really, more often than not, to mention. You know what I mean? Because you can talk about love, and you can express love in 1,000 songs, and you can express it differently each time. But when there's things that stick in your mind and you want to write about them, like when we got tear gassed in Italy, you know, and there was 250 riot troops lined up before we went on stage, the whole thing was expected, and I think the whole thing was done on purpose, you know. I think they wanted to disrupt the concert, just so that they could say no more, you know. I've written a thing about that, but we haven't done it yet. There's all sorts of things, but only in a very cheerful way, you know. We told them that the earth was round. That wasn't how they wrote it down. You know what I mean? So I suppose, I don't know. And there's always a feeling of movement as well, because I don't really like sitting still for very long in one place, you know. It doesn't really have to be travelling the world. It just has to be going from here to Wales and from Wales to somewhere else in Wales and all that. So there's all sorts of things involved. But I'm not sort of going into the politics of it. Because then, I mean, I just get snared in my own trap, I think, because I can't say any more than anybody else.
Do the rest of the guys, we'll ask John this, how do you feel on subjects like this? Do you have any political things or anything like this that you feel strongly about?
Well, there's a number of things, you know, that happen that you think, you know, shouldn't be happening, but it depends, you know, you can, you know, different musicians are, you know, you think back on, I've written songs and everything, but it depends whether it's going to do any good. But, you know, I don't think you should sit down and say, I'm going to write about it, just, you know, like, sit down and write a song just because, you know, that the rivers are polluted, which Robert was just saying, you don't, you know, if it happens to, you know, come into a song, you know, and you just put it lightheartedly in and not actually digging a, you know, not saying, oh, you know, listen, I'm telling you sort of thing. It just comes in and, you know, says, look, have a, you know, look if you want. But, no, I don't really know. Some songs, really, I don't know, some writers have written some songs, and I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, really.
Do you envisage anything happening with the band like the George Harrison Bangladesh thing?
I don't know. We often talk about doing different things, but you have to make sure. You know, before I would do anything like that, I would do what Harrison did and go there. You know, see what sort of state it was, and just make sure that you actually donated the money to say the governor or something like that, or somebody who was actually going to use it, because you can give it to a charity organisation, but before they pay it to anybody else, that money pays for the cost of their organisation running. You know, and sometimes it can be quite frightening what they actually end up paying out to these people. You know, he's got to pay like 20 people's wages, office staff, he'll pay for the premises and all this, you see. And what's left then they donate to these countries and things that need the money. So I think I'd rather just do something and take the money there myself, you know, and at least go there first anyway to make sure that it's worth giving them something.
Let's get back
and there's a lot of things there are, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of countries in that, in a bit of a state, you know.
Let's get back to music again. What are your feelings on where the individual Beatles are at, for instance, now?
Oh, individual Beatles. I don't know. They seem to be sort of very different at the moment. You can like each one of them, for what they're doing, sort of thing. But like, there's been it's been a terrific change, especially if you and you lived in England all the time. You've actually seen it happen in front of your eyes. And if you listen to Beatles albums, the songs got much more individual towards the end. Like McCartney would do a song, Lennon would do a song, and a lot of all together singing songs gradually filtered out from sort of Hard Day's Night stuff, which was all like multiple singing all the time, and it got much more individual, didn't it, on later albums? And I think that they just got different. I mean, let's face it, how many years were they together? It's a long time. But I would have liked to have seen them stay together. Really would. It's quite a shame to see a group like that suddenly break up. I thought they, I think everybody really used to just say Beatles, and there isn't many people, no matter from like 2 years old to sort of to 100 years old, everybody seems to like the Beatles. It was just amazing, wasn't it? It was, you can go around with us and there'll be like loads of saying, oh no, I don't like Zeppelin, but with the Beatles it was just ridiculous. Everybody seemed to like them, It's like a fever.
What was your favourite thing that stood out in the whole Beatles time?
Oh, I don't know about one favourite thing, loads of things. One thing I always love to see of theirs is the film when they played at Shea Stadium, I don't know whether you've seen that film yourself. Oh, it's about, we usually get it about once a year on our Christmas edition of Top of the Pops. But it's one of the amazing pieces of film you've ever seen if you want to see sort of absolute, like girls just collapsing at the sight of them, and it was just absolutely stunning, ridiculous. Getting them into the gig in an armoured car, they've been ripped to pieces. It was just amazing. But in actual fact, that you look back at that film, and that concert went incredibly well. If you'd have looked at the police force they had on at that concert compared, if you tried to do that concert again now, you'd find it completely different. Because they had more or less a skeleton police force. It was just unheard of, that there'd be any trouble. They had enough to keep the crowd sort of back, sort of thing, but there was none of this great sort of truncheons and all that. It's quite comical, because you see great pictures of the cops sort of doing this, to all the Beatles stuff. But if you do that concert now, you'd probably find yourself with like wagons full of riot police outside waiting for any trouble, and all this sort of thing. It's changed a lot since then. People weren't looking for trouble in music then, because it didn't alter them in their own back garden, sort of thing. Oh well, that's okay, let that go on. It's not doing anything to me. But then when it came a whole thing where every kid grew up and liked this sort of music, and then it started to affect them, and that's why it's gone through a big change.
It's down to the paranoia of the people who see what's going on and try and avert it. You know what I mean? I mean, try and avert it because they're frightened, and I don't know what all that's about anyway, but they do. And that's as soon as that happens, that's when the vibe starts, and it's just grown and grown and grown. So concerts are a meeting of a lot of people, and they use it to express all sorts of things now, and it's stupid. It's absolutely ridiculous.
You recently did a concert. It's the first one for a while in England, wasn't it?
Well, we did a whole tour.
Yeah, right, a whole tour. And the one that was given the big write-up was where? That was at
Wembley.
At Wembley, that's right.
Empire Pool. We did 2 nights.
And how was the audience reaction that night? What was the feeling?
It was just like the Band of Joy, really, or just like the first night we had nerves, and we were hopping up and down saying let's get on, because it was really cold there. It's an ice rink, ice skaters paradise, and they hadn't put the heaters on till half an hour before. 9,500 people freezing, and we were freezing, but it was good. It was really good, because once we got started, everybody was opening up everywhere, and the second night they'd left the heating on all night long, so everybody was in a different mood again. It went really, really well. In America you just get a bit pensive because you don't see things worked in England as they are there. The whole system of keeping what they call keeping the people down, or whatever it is, doesn't stretch here to the entertainment. Really, I think a lot of people come up and compliment you, and they're usually the ambulance crews or first aid or the police or something like that, and they say, "Good, well done," you know. Because over here, it's an occasion, you know. It's still used as a way of enjoying yourself. So it just felt like having a good gig.
And did you have many girls screaming that night, second night?
I don't think there were any. Now and again, there's a scream as if somebody's finally found what they were born for. And that, oh dear me, you can never see them because they shut up too quick. But now and again, it's usually in smaller towns that you get the occasional little chick, but it's not the done thing, you see, now. So you have to stifle yourself.
It's starting to happen with people like Mark Bolan and Rod Stewart and the Faces.
Mm.
They're getting screams. Do you feel you're in a different musical plane, or
No, not really. I think it's all down to entertainment anyway. And,
Being British.
well, what we were talking about before was that when the mass listens to something, it's just popular or not popular, you know. So I don't think we're any different to the Faces or anything like that. I suppose that we could go about the whole thing in another way, and so induce a state of mass hysteria, you know. You can be done, you know what I mean?
do you like the idea of mass hysteria coming back in like it was in the Beatles' heyday?
Well, it'd be an improvement on antagonists and this, that and the other and all the old crap. Because it really just boils down to those people are owning up that they can really let themselves totally go, you know. You should just shake hands at the beginning of a concert. And at the end of it, you should feel fulfilled, the audience should, you know. So, however they get off the best is the best way to do it. I'm sure a lot more people would scream if the boyfriends didn't say, where are you at, you know. Because it's still a good way of expressing yourself, isn't it? Apparently in Singapore, where we might be going, the boys scream there too. And when Jimmy was in the Yardbirds, he said, "There's one thing I must tell you about Singapore."
Speaking about Jimmy, Jimmy Page have got the whole band together, started the whole thing moving. Has he been the leader of the band all the way through?
Well, it's hard to say what a leader is. He's, at the beginning, his decisions were the only ones because he was the only one who knew anything, you know, really about what we were just about to go into, you know. But since then, I mean, we just sit down and talk and work everything out, really. But he did start it. Because you can't really just... there's no such thing as a leader in any group, because if a person was in that position to make all the decisions without considering anybody, it just wouldn't... Well, I suppose it does work, you know, if it's Count Basie or somebody like that. But... or Tom Jones or something like that, but not on the way that when it's 4 individuals all donating, you know, towards the music.
With your singing, always in big publicity and so on, how you'd have baffles up in the studio because your voice was so powerful and everything. Do you have any difficulty pulling back and singing something soft?
Well, you'll have to listen to that album a little bit, and then you can answer it for yourself. But I can,
Well,
I do, you know, because it's just encompassing different things all the time.
Why I asked was not because I hadn't heard you
Mm.
singing softly. I just wondered whether it was difficult for you.
Oh no, not really. It's probably the easiest. I don't really know. See, it's the mood of the music that makes you can sing anything in a high-pitched pseudo-spade voice all the time, you know, if you want to. But then you have to acquire a high-pitched pseudo-spade voice. You know, if you just sing, then you're all right. You know, so when I sing loud and when I want to put a point over or something like that, then the higher part of my voice will come out, and normally it's just rocking along, you know. I don't have to stand that far back and go. There was a time when I used to have to sing loud all the time when I had no PA. Well, not no PA, but virtually no PA, because with John playing and all that. The first days of the group, we had a lousy PA. Everywhere we went, at the end of the night, I was absolutely hoarse, you know. And still nobody would hear me.
What difficulties do you come across when you actually go into the studio to record?
I don't think we do. really. It's really a case of you got to find a studio and a sound that really transmits what you sound like on stage, you know. So really the hardest thing about getting into a studio is finding the right one.
What about the new album now? Let's talk a little bit about that. What is your personal opinion on the new album?
Took a long time to come out because there was a fuck up here and a cock up there, and it shouldn't have gone into the months that it went into in preparation. And but you see, unfortunately, fortunately we're in the position where we do the albums ourselves. You know, it's all our time until we give the finished thing to the company, but they have to organise the cover. We decide what we want on it identically and pass it on to them, the prints, the proofs and everything. But of course they keep on sending you back their idea of it, and they might alter the shade of the whole cover, you know. And when you're trying to put across something, a mood or something, then the shade of the cover matters, so you have to go through a rigmarole, a total rigmarole. You know, this is where you fall down, you know, with the record company itself. I think it was a good album. I think it still is a good album. I think it's, I don't know, every album is so different, you know. I think at the beginning everybody wanted it not to be. People who listened to it wanted the first album, every album, you know. Maybe the next album would be like the first one. But it's good, it's the fourth album. You know, I like the third album a lot. But
what particular things do you like on the third album?
Friends and Run Ra Stomp. Immigrant Song I really like too. That's really good. You know, we always start with it, but when you do play that, I feel like a surge coming out, you know, because the thing knits so well. So, and the fourth album, there are really good things on that too, Stairway to Heaven and When the Levee Breaks, things like that. You can just go on. I think I like them all, actually. It's a good group.
Right, back to John again. What significance does the fourth album have for you?
I don't know. I suppose the fourth album really. One little thing that it was for me, that I found a drum sound that, you know, like the sound I got on a couple of the tracks was a sound that I've stumbled on and yet looked for 3 years, if you know what I mean. But no, apart from that, no more than any other album. You know, because I can still listen to, say, 1 and 2 and 3, and, you know, still get as much from them as I would from listening to the fourth. You know, I don't think the fourth is any better than the other album. It's just the fourth album and doing stuff that, you know, happened at the time, whereas one was what we were doing then, you know. But you'll find each member of the group, actually, you ask for favourite tracks, they're all probably a lot different, you know. Everybody's got the little favourites on each album, you know, and yet as an album, that, you know, I like them all, you know.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have been dissatisfied with any of the albums, you see, which puts us in the position where we've been happy with everything, really, you know. And every time you change, if you concoct the whole thing yourself anyway, then you've got to be happy with it. So really, it's hard to, you can't rave on about it, but at the same time, we had quite a bit of material, and those are the ones that we chose, and they're good, you know. When it's your own album, you can't really go overboard, because you've worked and worked and worked on it, and you reckon it's good, but, you know, you can't take it any farther than that.
What about just 1 or 2 favourite tracks so that we've got something to play into from the album of yours?
What, from the fourth album?
Yeah, from the fourth.
Oh, crikey, it's hard to pick. I think favourites are things that get over a period of time, you know. I wasn't particularly talking about the fourth album, I was talking about the past albums, because, you know, you just find yourself liking songs perhaps more than others. But that'll change as well. You often start out, like when an album comes out, and you'll probably like so-and-so a bit better than the others, but then it'll change, and in a year's time you might play it and decide, oh no, you know, this is, you know. But on the fourth at the moment, I like them all. You know, if I play it, I don't pick any tracks out at all.
Robert, what would happen if Led Zeppelin made no more money? How would it affect you? This losing the success and everything.
Well, then I'd have to milk me goats more often, I think. It's impossible. really. But I think I'd just carry on singing what I'm singing now, or carry on writing. Don't think it'd make much difference, really, because I don't spend a lot of money anyway.
What about the future of Led Zeppelin from here? Right, what are the plans now that this album's released?
Australia. We're going to a lot of places, South America.
What day are
Things
you in
like that.
Australia?
No idea. I'm going to Bombay first. I'll think about Australia when I leave Bombay.
We did the first stage in Australia on the 16th in Perth. That's the first one. I mean, the rest I've got a list, but I don't know what they are. But most of the major cities, I think it's Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, all those sort of places.
Yes, it's excellent that you are going to Australia, because we've had so many times in the past where a band's gone to Australia after they've worn out all the gigs everywhere else, and you're still right up their band. What was there any particular? Was it your idea to go to Australia, or how did it all come about?
Well, I've got a cousin called Colin Kane, and I'm freaking John out. And well, I don't really know. You see, near to Australia, there's an island called Bali, and I wouldn't mind going there. So, if by chance the plane has to land there to refuel, I might never go anywhere else. I just thought I'd get near to it. I don't know. Australia's a dominion, isn't it, of England? Is it?
No, it's in the Commonwealth.
Is it? Fantastic. Well, all the more reason.
Saying Rule Britannia in harmonies. Right, so what would you be changing the act at all for Australia?
The act? Now then. Well, I don't. I usually swivel my hips from left to right. I don't think there'll be any change of that.
Apart from we've dropped the Highland song and started singing Tie Your Kangaroos Down.
Right. I don't really know. We don't have... No, I don't think we can change it. Besides that, we haven't rehearsed for about 4 years. So I don't think so.
Seriously, what sort of what can Australian audiences expect from you on stage?
Well, I don't know what the feel is towards Led Zeppelin being nice and soft and quiet occasionally, but there'll be some of that. Depends how many cakes get thrown at us and things like that. I don't know. It's just it depends how we feel or what we want to play. Really, we've got things that we do every night regularly, and they go into different constructions, like I spoke about at the beginning. But I think there'll be favourites to suit everyone.
Yeah. It's sometimes, say we go there and we find that, say there's it sometimes might be a big favourite that people have got. We'll often perhaps put that in just because it makes them feel good, you know. Even if we haven't played it for some time, we very often do it. And you always get this at concerts, you know. But, you know, our concerts are quite long, really, and it'd be best for far as when we do go there, if they just sort of wait the concert out. Because what happens with a lot of them is they start shouting out for all these songs, you see, but, you know, and you end up, and then just a minute, like, and you got one shouting for something and one shouting, and if they eventually were to sit the concert out, they would find we play most of them anyway, you see. So just put that point across there, you buggers.